So you may have noticed Orb Crossbow is rather insane right now with the sheer amount of damage it can output. There are even some switches you can do so you can have a ton of survivability. So I ultimately want to cover my build guide for Orb Crossbow, covering the skill setup, specializations, weapon masteries and their priority, along with rotation, and I'm ready to publish my quest log. It's got the path starting from the free gear you get with the Path of Ascension to the steps I will take from tier 2 gear to ultimately what I believe is the min-max best you could go for. Just keep in mind, all of this is open to change. The devs could nerf it at any time, and my build is going to be directed for something that you can easily switch up to a different weapon set if need be. So nothing's exclusive to Orb Crossbow. If I follow up with new updates, be sure to check the video description below for a link to that. So looking at the skill setup here, this is what I usually play with the main option being switching to Eternal Veil rather than Ambidexterity. If we jump to skill specializations, you can see them here. You have Star Calling. It is not a must-have to have the orb duration, and depending on your mana, you may not need this either, potentially freeing you up 8 specialization points. You will use this ability to simply place down 3 orbs, and then you'll want to maintain them, but you can do so with other abilities. So once you have them down, you usually don't have to place them again if you have enough cooldown. Stellar Dash is our main damage ability, and this will simply shoot out damage projectiles from each of the orbs along with anybody who is a satellite. Now what's really important to have on this ability is the extra damage boost here, but also the pierce damage. This applies a weaken, which is where we get the synergy with Selfless Diffusion for Crossbow, triggering it a ton to get all of that cooldown. And then we have additional use simply to cast it more often. So you will already get 4 projectiles when you have 3 orbs down. 1 from yourself, 1 from the 3 orbs, and then you can put a satellite on yourself to get a 5th one, and then you can put a satellite on all your teammates to get another 5. And that's just a crazy amount of damage from Stellar Dash. You will combine this low cooldown with Milky Way to gain the damage boost here, along with the ability to refresh orbs, and Void Slash for its ability to refresh orbs. It's not overly necessary to have this reactivate one, but it is just a bit of extra damage, but you could put those 10 specializations somewhere else if need be. Now you can see, for example, here I'm using Healing Wave instead of that Void Slash, and that's when you put another 10 specialization points into this. I generally take them from here and from here. And then when you have this Healing Wave, it will no longer deal damage, so you're losing a bit, but you end up with a ton of survivability. So for every orb you have down, and then you cast this Healing Wave, you gain a ton of healing. It will of course depend on your stats, and you can see right here, we're going to receive probably about 10,000 heals. We'll do that again, and yeah, it depends. You can sometimes get a heavy as well, and you'll heal yourself for up to 20,000. And because it's in your combo of what you're going to spam all the time, you get to cast it very often and gain a ton of healing here. Not just for you, but everybody in that area. Summon Satellite, you want to have that to summon that satellite around you, and that's that extra orb effect, and thus extra Stellar Dash damage, as now you will gain 2 projectile hits, and we can use this specialization to gain a satellite on every single party member within our range. It is only for 3 seconds, affected by buff duration, I believe. However, you want to improve that here, and it will require a double cast, but it is super effective for burst damage. Amplification Veil is simply just a damage boost. You just need to be aware that if you lose this shield by an enemy damaging you, you will lose 15% of your base damage, as you can read via the tooltip, and the ability gets locked. So it is not something you should use if you're tanking a boss like right here. So I just switched to the normal version, and that gives me a bit of a shield, but without the damage buff. You'll do that again when you want survivability, removing those 2 specs, getting healing wave, and then you can also boost the shield you gain through this simply by having this specialization, which I still need to upgrade, and you will put it here instead of this ambidexterity. Just be aware though, you might want to switch up your weapon masteries so you're not using eternal body, so you'll actually gain the full shield health and improve the shield further. And then we can look at crossbow skills. So we have detonation mark, you just accumulate all the damage you deal, and then when this thing triggers, when its duration ends, it's going to be up to 80% of the damage you've dealt over that duration, again to the target. You just need to be mindful of the stacks. You want to have 2 stacks in order to have that full 80%. You can get lucky on an offhand trigger and you may immediately get 2 stacks. Here we only got 1. So what you want to do is when you have Selfless Diffusion active, you will extend the duration of that detonation mark. So I will just do some of the rotation right here, putting that detonation mark, and then you can see we can cast detonation mark again, and now we have 2 stacks. And if we keep attacking and applying more weakens, that detonation mark is not going to explode until much later. And if we just kept attacking there, we would have been able to keep continuing its duration, depending on how many weakens you're applying. If it does fall off, then you simply reapply it again. But you don't need to cast this thing if you have 2 stacks on the target, as it will keep accumulating the damage unless you want to blow it up early. As soon as you press it, it will explode all the previous damage and apply the new stacks. Mother Nature's Protest simply on Flame Shot here because it applies then another weaken for ultimately Selfless Diffusion here, which has that combination of extra offhand attack chance. Whenever you apply weakens, you get cooldown, and whenever you attack the target, you will increase the duration of your weaken effects. Then we have Mana Exchange. You'll want to spam this along with your other abilities here because you need as much mana as possible. And finally, Weak Point Shot, which you're just going to cast whenever the boss does a Wrath or Fury attack. This will allow you to give your team 24% extra critical damage. So whenever he's doing this purple attack, try and cast it. You can cast it just after you get the perfect block and it will still apply the debuff. You can see that right here. And you can extend that duration again with Selfless Diffusion. And that's your full kit. The rotation is ultimately this. Make sure Mother Nature's Protest is active. So it is glowing red like here. This is off, this is on. Then you use Star Calling 3 times, simply to place down those orbs. And if you have your target selected and you have the combat setting right here, aimed skills lock on target, it will put those orbs on the target. Then you can use Amplification Veil as your buff, then Summon Satellite. You'll use it twice again and try position yourself so you're amongst your allies so that you will place this satellite on them as well. Then you want to cast Selfless Diffusion followed by Detonation Mark. Again, try and keep an eye out on that detonation mark and check, did I get 1 stack or did I get 2 stacks? If I only got 1, be prepared to cast it again as soon as you can. Then you're into the spam rotation. All 4, again, you're just spamming. You prioritize Stellar Dash for, that's just your raw damage output, followed by Void Slash to refresh the duration of those orbs, so you never have to go place them down again. As you can see, their duration is expiring, you use that Void Slash and it just gets refreshed. You can use Milky Way and it will refresh them as well. But the main benefit of Milky Way is actually to gain the damage boost. This 12% stacking up to 5 times. And Mana Exchange simply for mana. Like, you want to be spamming that thing non-stop so that you can sustain this output in damage. Otherwise, yeah, in long fights, you'll end up with no mana pretty quick. Just be aware you do get some benefits when you are low on mana. So you might see some builds, oh, they're struggling on mana, they're like 30%. Well, we have big boosts that we can gain, like through this if you need it, and here. Finally, Temporal Leap and Weak Point Shot. Temporal Leap, you're simply going to use if you don't have like deadly markers in your group or you don't have enough cooldown or buff duration on Selfless Diffusion. So when Selfless Diffusion expires, first of all, you'll see this purple ring around it. This means it's active. You're good to go. Spam all those abilities. But when it drops off, finish casting the rest of them, and then they'll be on cooldown. Then you can enter Temporal Leap, and you will pretty much instantly recharge those abilities. And then you can go again with your rotation starting from the top. Make sure you have the orbs up. If you have them up already, then you can refresh them immediately again with Void Slash or Milky Way when available. So yeah, I hope this helps. That's how to play the basics of Orb Crossbow right now. Again, could change anytime if the devs decide they want to do some rebalancing. But now let's have a look at the weapon masteries. Which ones would I choose to give us the most benefits? Well, as my previous builds, I have these order priorities. So if you're only like 150, you'll follow each of these points until you're at 15. I have the same setup then here for crossbow, which matches what I had for fury as well. This gives you all of the stats you need to maximize your damage output. The later levels on crossbow are really underwhelming, so they're not that big of a priority. Just try and get like these stat boosts, this effect, this one, and this one, with finally this capstone where you need to stand within 10 meters of your target. Just be careful with the spectral, you need to stand 5 meters away from the target. As for the orb bonuses, we have a few impactful ones here, like resonance heavy attack, coordinated fracture, stacking echo, flow shift, and seer. You can argue that Light of Annihilation is useless because technically we don't consume any orbs. I haven't personally done any testing on it, but if you have level 200, what are you going to get otherwise? As per this sheet, you could take this point here, and that's just going to be a bunch of bonus damage and max mana, which doesn't really contribute to overall much damage. So yeah, that's pretty much what I would go with. Depending on what levels you have, you can work towards all of these with crossbow here. So then I quickly want to highlight again what I would do to get survivability. Like if you're used to playing Invocator, you're used to all those self-heals from Vampiric. Well, you can get similar here on Orb Crossbow. What you want to do is get this healing wave. So you will switch off Amplification Veil and off Reduce Resource Cost here. Then you get that healing wave, and whenever you have these orbs down, you're going to gain a ton of healing when you cast your healing wave in that area. Like we gained over 10,000 just there. Sometimes it can heavy attack and you'll gain upwards of 20,000. Additionally, you have this shield. Now, if you want to boost that shield further, you can get this internal veil. And I would switch it over here instead of ambidexterity. And I would also switch the mastery off here. So instead of having this weaken chance and this measly amount of species damage resistance, you can take this increased shield health and max health and debuff duration, and then you have this node which is kind of useless to us, instead of having this one which converts Eternal Veil so that it doesn't give you the shield health. So now you have over 50% and you should be able to shield yourself for like 4,000. But now let's look at gear and how do you actually want to build your Orb Crossbow so that it's optimal. Well, if we look at stats, the most important one is going to be buff duration. This will directly increase the duration of Selfless Diffusion and Satellite, allowing you to pretty much sustain the output in just spamming those abilities. So the more you have, the better. And you can get it through a bunch of sources, as you can see right here, like 113%. You could even get more, switching that strength over to another 14%. I don't really think that's worth it at that point. Keep in mind, there is a point where you can get too much, and that's when like you have enough cooldown combined with the cooldown benefits from the team, like Deadly Marker, that you end up just being able to cast this instantly again after its duration expires. And you do always have the option of just temporarily going into the Temporal Leap just for a split second and finishing the last few seconds on Selfless Diffusion so you can instantly cast it again. So if we quickly look at weapons, we can see, yeah, there's no doubt the Legendary Orb is going to be the best one to go for. Highest base damage and then all these extra stats. If you don't have this heroic trait, because they're seriously expensive, you can potentially switch the rune synergies over to get more perception, and that results in more buff duration as well, but probably not worth it again at this point. The crossbow, you ideally want Malakar's, but there's actually none available on EU as far as I've seen. Maybe there's one now, but the alternative is this right here, Lucian's from the co-op dungeons, or Queen Belandir's that I'm using. It's not bad, has more weaken effects again, allowing you to get more cooldown. In terms of the skill core, I'm not fully sure. Tevens is not really any point for this build because you're not using those abilities. Manticus, which I have selected right now, looks good, but you're not actually going to be summoning that many orbs. You're more so just refreshing the duration. We already use Milky Way, so that's kind of pointless. So we're kind of left with False Time or Magical Harmony, extending the duration of our orbs, or just getting a bit more cooldown on Stellar Dash. That cooldown will probably help more than anything else, which means you need the Shadowy Sphere, but it appears it doesn't have a drop location, just obtained through the contract coin merchant. As for the actual armor, I would go with the Full Blood Hunter set, especially if you're starting out new and don't have tier 2 gear. Now I do have tier 2 gear. I have the Spectral set. I have 2-piece, and then I had 2-piece Sacred. So I've switched those 2-piece Sacred over to 2-piece Demonic Beast Hunter. So these Brute Slayer pieces. That gives me more attack speed and more cooldown speed. Alternative to this would be the Void set if you had it. I didn't have the Void set, so I went with these. Immediately got that buff duration here in this one. The cloak, you undoubtedly want to be getting this Hellfire cloak with that critical damage and attack speed, and accessories. This is what I have as the tier 2 one. We will be getting an upgrade eventually, and that would be the Necklace of the Morning Mist, but it's not very accessible, and so I'll take my time getting it. You can straight away already get the Volcanic Glass bracelet, super easy from a dungeon drop, and the Belt of Twisting Fate also from the dungeon drop with the teardrops you can buy or obtain from the Burkent Abyss dungeon. These all give us super good stats, and they are pretty much best in stock because of those stats and the amount they give. The ring, I will eventually be upgrading to the Band of Brutal Agony, like many other people will as well, for those stats and the heavy attack damage. And you of course want the legendary ring, the legendary gloves with these stats here, and the legendary ring can get these stats. You can potentially switch the strength over to more cooldown if you feel you need it at that point, but you can probably just go with the strength. And that also puts you over 50, which is nice for the extra heavy attack and getting a decent amount of hit points. You might think this is still a bit squishy, and yeah, you can totally switch up to some more survivability here, getting over 28,000, losing a bit of crit damage and mana regen, and that would be when running into like Nightmare or the highest level of Trials. So the ultimate min-max that I would go for is this right here. You can see the full screenshot, and yes, in terms of runes on weapons, we're prioritizing buff duration and weaken chance. If you feel you have more than enough buff duration, then you can switch some of those to skill damage boost. For trait resonance, we have cooldown on the weapon, and then just mana regen on everything. Runes for accessories, you have the necklace with boss magic heavy attack, mana regen, same for the bracelet, and the rings we can take the weaken chance. This just again increases the chance we actually apply our weakens, more boss magic heavy attack, on the belt and the earrings, the same with the mana regen as defense runes. Those chaos runes will take you a while to get, but that's ultimately what you want to work towards. Otherwise, you're taking things like skill damage resistance, healing received. If you want to make some changes for survivability, you get skill damage resist on weapons, and then instead of mana regen, you take max health. Potentially even switching some chaos runes to more max health, and just making sure you get those synergies that also give you max health. And you can switch artifacts over to the full ancestral armor. You lose a bit of crit damage, but the gain in survivability is worth it if you're only just going to end up dying instead. Despite what it showed in the Korean server, this is full leather. So you are gaining the extra material effects for leather. So crossbow gets the mana regen bonus damage, and orb will give you the cooldown and attack speed. And yeah, again, it's really important you have as much buff duration and cooldown speed as possible in order for this build to work. Like if your duration is just 6 seconds and you're sitting with a cooldown that's like 30 seconds, this build is going to feel like garbage. You'd only have a 6-second window of actually dealing meaningful damage. Outside of that, you'd barely be doing anything. It is a build that really requires good stats. Now, that's not to say this build is only going to be useful for Orb and Crossbow. I've set this up and I've chosen these things because they will work for a lot of other classes. I can use the same armor set on pretty much any damage dealer, it's going to work. I can use the same accessories on any damage dealer as well, it's going to work there too. The only thing you need to change is the runes, from like magic boss heavy attack to something else of a damage type depending on what weapons that you're using. All of our damage does come from the orb with next to nothing from the crossbow. That's why we go with all this boss magic heavy attack, and these are the only important ones. You don't need to get crit much higher. Deadly marker will give you another 360 and your heavy attack is way more than enough. So ultimately, I hope this helps. The Path of Ascended gear is simply what you would choose when you do your Path of Ascension here in step 1 and climb these boxes. And then you'll want to directly work on this tier 3 gear. You can potentially go back, get this tier 2 necklace, but I would just stay with the necklace you got through the Ascended gear. Stay with the Death Knell Gorgot until you can potentially get this one. So yeah, as a new player starting out, this is all the gear you're given and you'll simply start farming and get this stuff. You can potentially go back and get the spectral armor just for the crit damage and maybe the brute slayer like I have with this alt setup. This would actually be better than what I have. I currently have spectral chest and headpiece, but it would actually be a little bit better to have the spectral headpiece and boots. You can mix and match and like that, that's fine. Just leave the gloves free for the legendary ones. And then you'd have like 2 brute slayer ones here. But again, not ideal, and you'll eventually want to try and get the Blood Hunter set. And yeah, crossbow, easy alternative, get the one from the dungeon here. I may add another step here just to go between this min-max full setup and this very starter one, as you may not want to switch to what I have right here. And again, all that gear I'll be able to use on Invocator, Fury, and any other build that I choose to play with. Just a matter of switching some runes. But again, new tier 3 gear could be coming in a few months. You could always wait for that better stuff. And if you already have the good tier 2 stuff like Spectral, Void, just stay with it. Even accessories are not a must to upgrade, especially if you have some Nebula ones which already have cooldown and attack speed. So I hope this helps. Thanks all for watching. A massive thank you to all my channel members for your extra support. And we'll see you guys around.